Good evening, everybody. I would like to welcome members and the public to this evening's meeting of the City Council. I will ask my chaplain to open the meeting.
I'll sit if that's okay with you. It seems easier with the microphone. Very recently, I came into the possession of two very valuable artefacts, two pieces of art. There are a couple of people here who might recognise them, given that one of them was prepared by the Mayor of Cambridge and one by the Deputy Mayor of Cambridge. You might remember these two articles.
It took us hours, Ian.
Both of my friends on the right did some lovely colouring in at the Harvest Festival service which they attended at Chesterton Methodist Church just a few weeks ago. Colouring in of Super Spud, a lesser-known superhero who we encountered at the service. So they very kindly signed them, so when they're worth a lot of money, we'll know where they came from. We're used to children colouring in. We find sometimes at church that it's really helpful for grown-ups to do colouring in as well. I suspect that's probably going on right now amongst you while you're sitting listening to me. Sometimes we find that people listen better when they're busy doodling or colouring. Yes, occasionally it's a sign that they don't want to listen, but actually some people find it really helpful. And so just a moment or two of musing on listening this evening. Listening amongst a group of people, all of whom are busy. I share that occupation, busy with priorities and deadlines, many things in our minds. Sometimes we have to work really hard to remember that we need to listen. And I've found that it's really easy to forget the art of listening well because of busyness. And I've discovered that listening well nurtures the seeds of transformation in so many ways. One quick example for you: in the church in which I serve, the Methodist Church in Britain, 25 years ago we started a journey of listening around the issues of human sexuality. When we started, the conversations were deeply, deeply divisive and full of anger and suspicion. Much has happened in a quarter of a century, particularly in the last decade. What's interesting is that the disagreements haven't disappeared, but the way in which people are talking to each other has changed. So much so that very probably next year in the Methodist Church, we'll probably be agreeing that at least some churches will be ready to welcome people to get married if they're in a same-sex couple, something which I will celebrate if that day comes. But what provoked the shift was people learning to listen well to each other and to hear the stories of each other. Listening is very important to me as a person. Some of you may well know I was born with a hearing impairment, which wasn't diagnosed until I was nearly 4 years old, something that wouldn't happen today to children born with a hearing impairment. I had to concentrate really hard on listening well, often maintaining eye contact with whoever is talking to me. I sometimes wonder what difference would be made in public life if we were just that little bit better at our attention to listening to each other in our busyness. I should be here long enough to see about the listening this evening and how noisy we might be with one another in a way which of course is inevitable for you in your occupation. An invitation to pause for a moment and to listen. Not to words, you'll have many words during your meeting this evening, but maybe to listen briefly to what we know about ourselves in our situations and our ability to listen. The art of listening is undervalued, it seems to me. I'll leave you with some simple words from the prophet Micah: to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly.
Thank you, Ian. We're not expecting the fire alarm to go off. If it does, please exit at the back and the front of the council chamber or the rear of the public gallery and follow the exit signs. For wheelchair users and those with mobility issues, please make your way to the safe waiting area on Pease Hill side stairwell. Council officers will be on hand to assist. An accessible unisex toilet is located outside the council chamber, opposite the members' room. A drinks machine or a water dispenser are located in the corridor opposite Committee Room 1. The council is filming this meeting and a copy will be available to view in the coming days. Can councillors speak into their microphones so that everyone can hear their contributions that are made? Could I ask all councillors to be concise with their contributions and to show respect for their fellow members? Agenda item 1, approval of the minutes. Can I approve the minutes of the council meeting held on the 18th of July 2019, which can be found on pages 7 to 26 of your agenda? Okay, thank you. Okay, I have apologies have been received from Councillor Collis, Hipkin, Smith and Payne. Is there anybody else? No? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Smith?
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, I think some of those are just coming late, aren't they?
Oh yes, Councillor Payne. Sorry. I wasn't reading properly, was I? Okay. The annual outing for the senior citizens to Great Yarmouth in August was once again a huge success, and I thank those councillors who helped with stewarding. Chariots of Fire. I was honoured to join the High Sheriff in presenting the awards at this year's event recently. The turnout was fantastic and the event was most enjoyable. There are a number of civic events I would like to remind you all of coming up in November. Members are invited to this year's annual firework display on Midsummer Common on Tuesday the 5th of November. The reception starts at 6 p.m. and in Cambridge Live tent, with the fireworks starting at 7 p.m. Rowing. I'd be very pleased if members could join me at one of my charity events, which is for the Rowing Trust on the 8th of November, starting at 6:30. It is here in the large hall. There is a band, food and artwork on display, and it is a ticketed event, and you will have received an email about it today. Remembrance. Members will be aware that Remembrance Sunday civic service will take place on Sunday the 10th of November. Anyone wishing to attend at Great St Mary's Church at 10:55 a.m. is asked to let the Sergeant at Mace know this evening, please. I shall be laying the wreath on behalf of the city at the War Memorial, and anyone wishing to join me there is very welcome to do so at 10:30 a.m. Mayor's reception. I look forward to seeing members at my reception, which is here on Friday the 15th of November at 6:45. There will be food, entertainment. The Mayor's reception is an opportunity to thank members of our community that I and others linked to the City Council have had the pleasure of meeting and working with during the year. Chevin service. This is an advance notice that the preaching of the Chevin sermon will take place on Sunday the 26th of January 2020. Invitations will be sent out nearer the time. Local Champions Day. Local government workers are true local champions, working as a team, both on the front line and behind the scenes. They encourage our communities to thrive and to help most vulnerable in our society. They often go above and beyond to support people working under the constant pressure of unfair funding cuts and rising demands for help. Far too often their dedication is overlooked. Councillor Kevin Price has recently been out and about photography workers performing their very varied duties. Early today, the Chief Executive launched a display of Councillor Price's photographs, displayed outside the chamber on the landing. Please do take a look in the break, and if you have not already done so, please do. And Councillor Price, would you like to say any words?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, just briefly, I was asked by Unison if I would be interested in taking some photographs for their local service champions, and I said yes I would. And so over the last 2-3 weeks I've met with various council employees at various parts of the city and just taken photos of them doing their job. No looking at the camera, just doing their job. I think a couple of things I wanted to get across, if I may, Madam Mayor. One was that the absolute dedication of the people that I was photographing, and their love of their job, whatever that job was. That was from the guy that's cleaning the markets in the mornings to our tree people. Just absolutely everybody loves their job. They know that working for a local authority is not going to make them rich, and that's not what they do it for. They do it because they absolutely genuinely love the job. And the purpose behind this campaign of Unisons for local service champions is really to get across to the public what services the council provides and the people that provide those services. So, when people come into town at 9 o'clock in the morning and the streets are all looking clean, the cleaners will tell you, come and have a look at the streets at 5 o'clock in the morning, and then you'll see, the sorts of things that we're doing. And it is, Madam Mayor, without those people, this city would literally grind to a halt. So I've been really proud and privileged to have been involved in this little campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. They were fantastic photos. I've looked at them myself, and well done. I know you're a good photographer anyway. Okay, declarations of interest. I would like to ask members to declare now any interest in the items on the agenda before us this evening. Members are reminded that they can declare interest at any time during the meeting if anything occurs to them during the debate tonight.
My wife, Sarah Ferguson, is Assistant Director at the County Council and has a responsibility for housing need, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Member of the Cambridge Cycling Campaign.
Okay.
Trustee of Winter Comfort, Madam Mayor.
Volunteer for Food Cycle.
Yes, my partner works for Willow Walk, thank you.
Yes, I also volunteer for Food Cycle.
I am a trustee of Cambridge Cyrenians.
Thank you very much, everyone. Would Council please note the returning officer is required to report that Josh Matthews has been elected to the office of Councillor at the by-election for Newnham on the 8th of August. On behalf of the Council, I welcome Councillor Matthews and hope you enjoy your time in office. Thank you. I'd just like to add one thing as well. I was at Winter Comfort today and spoke to some of the clients, which was very good. But there was one thing I found out about that. People don't give many clothes for the women who are homeless. So I'm doing an appeal tonight to see if any members have got any coats, jeans, underwear, things like that for a woman, as well as men, if you've got some, or sleeping bags. Winter Comfort would love to have them. Okay, so that's just appeal to members. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Smart.
That's a really good idea, Councillor. So where do we bring them to when we got the stuff? Do we bring it into the council?
No, if you take them down to Winter Comfort,
Okay, right, yep.
that'd be fine. Okay, agenda item 4, public question time. I understand that the following wish to address the meeting. Mr. Tompkins? Each speaker must address their comments to the chair of the relevant committee or relevant executive councillor. Your question or statement must be limited to 3 minutes, and with a further 2 minutes for supplementary question or comment on something that has been said by the councillor. I will advise you when your 3 minutes or 2 minutes are over. Would you now like to address the chamber, Mr. Tompkins?
Thank you. Madam Mayor and City Councillors, my name is Stephen Tompkins and I'm Chairman of the Cam Valley Forum, which is a community group concerned with the welfare of the river. Without a healthy River Cam, this is not Cambridge. The Cam needs protection from the over-abstraction of its groundwater sources. This has in recent years caused low flows, and its upper river, that is the Cam coming from Saffron Walden direction, is currently classed under the Environment Agency European Water Directive as of poor quality. Given that we are in a water-stressed region and that this is now well recognised by all the local water companies and the government agencies concerned, could Cambridge City Council grant to the River Cam a much greater protected status?
Councillor Thornborough?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to thank Mr Tompkins very much for coming in. Unfortunately, this is quite a dire situation, and a few weeks ago I actually went after a weekend of very heavy rains to look at some of the chalk streams upriver, and there were really just a trickle in some places, and where it was more than a trickle, it was basically the outflow from sewage works. So the River Cam in Cambridge City is designated a county wildlife site, as is Hobson's Brook, and Nine Wells is a local nature reserve. So those categories means that the rivers and the brooks would be material consideration in a planning application. There's also an EU directive, the EU Water Framework Directive, which aims to bring all rivers to good ecological status. However, anything below good is really considered failing. And from what I have seen, the Granter and the Lower Cam chalk streams are considered to be failing. The information for this is actually on the Environment Agency website, but unfortunately that was last updated in 2016. So there are so many questions to be asked and so many questions unanswered. So from what I've also doing some more research, I've heard today comment from an expert that our River Cam could be dead next year. There will be no spawn from the headwaters. It's an ecological disaster. But I don't think Cambridge City Council are in a position to increase the protective status of the river. But we are in a position where we can try and find as much information as possible and start asking as many questions of the right people as possible. So I'm going to be calling a forum for the water crisis, and it needs to be a cross-party action. In fact, cross-party including the local politicians in South Cambs. And I have written to Councillor Bick asking if a member of his team could participate, and I know some councillors from South Cambs have already agreed, so this will be held soon, and I hope, Mr Tompkins, that you will be able to attend. So we will gather evidence and we will ask the questions and we will to the highest possible level, and there will be an outcome report. But thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you. May I just say, Madam Mayor, that I'll leave 2 copies of the River Camp Manifesto, which we recently produced, on your desk, and if councillors want to find it, it's online if you Google for Cam Valley Forum. I think the document speaks everything for what I'm feeling and what wants to be expressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Tompkinson. Okay, we now go on to agenda item 5, recommendation of the executive for adoption. We now turn to item 5A, contained in pages 27 to 118. Recommendation of the Executive Councillor for Housing concerned to Housing Revenue Account Medium-Term Financial Strategy. Does Councillor Johnson wish to introduce this item? You have up to 10 minutes for introducing this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will certainly not need that total. The HRA Medium-Term Financial Strategy aims to provide an update on the financial assumptions which underpin its business plan. Since the budget setting report earlier this year, there have been some developments which have resulted in a positive change in these assumptions. The 2 most notable changes being confirmation by the government that the 4 years' worth of rent cuts will end from next April, providing additional rent revenue. The MTFS also takes note of a decision to remove the assumption that we will be required to dispose of our higher value stock, bringing us into line with most stockholding authorities. These changes have resulted in the Council now being in a position, outlined in more detail within its updated asset management strategy, to positively revise the life cycle replacement period of components under the Decent Home Standard and reinsert investments required to tackle the backlog of decent homes over the 10-year period from 2021 to 22. In terms of other capital budget changes, additional funding is proposed to assist with a work programme to improve early heat detection for fire prevention purposes and to protect means of escape, with £360,000 allocated to allow for the replacement of approximately 300 external doors, now that we have received details of the standard required from government, and £2.7 million, of which £500,000 is allocated for this financial year, with the remainder in the next, to undertake remedial structural works to balconies and walkways across 3 housing estates. There is the potential for similar investments in other blocks of similar age and construction, and capital bids will need to be made as part of the 2020 to 21 budget process if required, following the outcome of condition surveys which are ongoing. The MTFS also takes account of revised assumptions relating to the budgets allocated and made available in proceeding with the construction of over 500 new council homes, which we remain on track to deliver by 2022. And even though no formal proposals are contained in the MTFS, officers have undertaken initial modelling work to demonstrate that it is possible, now that the cap has been lifted, to borrow in order to build, we hope, a further 1,000 council homes over the course of the next decade. I will refer to Councillor Pora's amendment when I'm asked for my right to reply. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Pora, as you have given notice of an amendment which is on page 7 of the information pack, would you like to introduce this before I ask Councillor Cantrell as Housing Spokes?
Yes, please, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you.
You have 3 minutes.
Oh, I won't take that long.
Okay.
I just wanted to reassure people I'm not going to speak for long. It's a fairly self-explanatory amendment. It's not a new recommendation, it's just noting a decision that we made unanimously in HSC. And I should like to thank the Executive Council. We've had a good discussion about it, and I understand that you're supportive as well. I would just like to recommend this amendment to you all. It's about prioritising the climate emergency I think we've all agreed on, and just reviewing how we look at the housing stock over the next few years, making sure, for example, in 10 years from now, we're still not buying gas boilers when there might be a better, more effective and eco-friendly way of doing it. It does what it says in the tin, really. So I just urge you all to support this motion, and thanks again to the Executive Councillor for lending his support. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Cantrell,
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
you have up to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I take this opportunity to congratulate you on your national award? Well done, well deserved. So, Madam Mayor, in February this year, I brought a motion to the Chamber calling for us to act in relation to a climate emergency. And that motion was in part in response to a petition that a number of residents brought, where they quite rightly brought to our attention that every day we don't act in relation to addressing climate change is a day missed, it's an opportunity missed. So it saddened me actually that when I saw the papers for HRA, and in particular the MTFS and the Associated Asset Management report, that actually those reports were lacking in detail in terms of actions that we would take in a key area of the Council's activities, our own housing stock, the stock that we have built today. Not houses that we're currently building or homes that we're intending to build in the future, but those homes, approximately 7,000, that our tenants live in today. And the interesting thing, and as my colleague referenced, for example, there was detail in the reports, but that detail, for me, seemed as though it was steady as she goes, not grasping the opportunity to address head-on, tackle climate change. So, for example, we're going to spend over 100 million in new gas boilers over the course of the plan. 100 million. There is an opportunity in itself to actually use that money in a much more productive and positive way to address the environmental footprint of our council homes, and also, as a result of that, help our council tenants in terms of hopefully reducing their utility bills and the cost of their living in this city. So I do welcome the amendment. I do hope the Executive Councillor will support it, because I think it is very critical that we are, in the key area of activity that we undertake, addressing the big issue of climate change. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Is there any debate? No? Okay. Councillor Johnson, do you wish to do a reply?
I do. I just want to say, in respect of Councillor Poor's amendment, I'm prepared to accept it on the grounds that it merely confirms that this side of the council chamber's intended approach. I'm pleased that the opposition agree with us on this subject, because the MTFS document in front of members contains a commitment for additional future investment in improving the energy efficiency of our existing housing stock. See pages 34 to 35, and it is our intention that proposals to that effect will be brought forward in the next budget setting report. And as we build new homes, we need to focus indeed on ensuring that they are sustainable for the future. And all the sites that are currently being developed exceed national sustainability standards, with the proposals for Buchan Street and the Meadows, Colville Road, as well as Phase 2 for Mill Road, exceeding these standards by 35 to 40%. Nevertheless, we are committed to reviewing the Sustainable Housing Design Guide and to ensure that we introduce further measures to reduce emissions, installing renewable energy technologies to benefit tenants through lower energy bills and to benefit the planet through exemplar low-carbon developments.
Okay, thank you very much. I will now go to the vote. Please, can I see those in favour of the amendment? Unanimous? Okay, lovely. So I'll go straight on to... Yeah. Yeah. That one, yep. Can I see those in favour of the recommendation as amended?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And now go on to agenda item 5B on page 119 to 156 of your agenda. Recommendation of the Executive Councillor for Finance and Resource concerning the revenue of Council Tax Reduction Scheme. Councillor Robertson, do you wish to introduce this item?
I will do. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. And right, well, this item, although it's inherently about the way we administer the Council Tax Reduction Scheme, it's come about because of the problems with universal credit. So we need to discuss that first, I think. Although universal credit had some laudable objectives when it was introduced, in particular simplifying the benefits available to those in need, the problem is that when the system was established, it had built into it problems for claimants in the way it was to be administered. And in fact, the overall effect has been that more people have lost out than have gained from the system. Those with the lowest incomes lose the most, and although there is some protection built into the universal credit, that protection does get withdrawn over time, and new claimants don't get the protection in the first place anyway. And if people's circumstances change, or if they come off benefits and then go back onto them again, they lose this transitional protection. So there's major problems with it. The universal credit was, of course, introduced by the coalition government of Liberal Democrats and Conservative Party, and they are to blame for the iniquities of the way it was administered. There are flaws in it which are countless reviews and amendments have failed to improve on. Those failures are still built into the system. One of them is that every time there's a change in somebody's earnings, the City Council is notified of those changes if they're for claimants who are also on Council Tax Reduction Scheme. So anybody who's paid weekly, but paid on a weekly basis but paid monthly, some months they get paid 4 weeks and some months they get paid 5 weeks. A change in earnings, which has to be notified to the City Council, which means we have to change the system, change the assessment of their earnings and their eligibility for reduction scheme help, and notify them. That causes an endless amount of extra work for the city. It also means that the claimant doesn't really know where they're going from month to month. So somebody who is in that position will probably have 8 changes a year, because as you move from 4 weeks, and then 5 weeks, and then back to 4 weeks, 5 weeks, there's 8 changes a year. We have to be notified. This is ridiculous, obviously, and this is why this particular proposal has been will be brought in April next year, to simplify things and put people in bands of earnings so that they should stay within those bands most of the time. There will be people who will change from band to band, but at least most of the time they will stay within their band, and therefore their council tax bill will not change, or the council tax help will not change. So the council has been in this position before of having to administer something which is not in the interests of the people of Cambridge. The poll tax I was involved in at the time in helping the council administer it, and we had to put it into place, but on a political basis we attacked it and tried to do away with it. I think that the Labour Party has now decided that universal credit should be scrapped, and we will scrap it if we get into office. That is inherent will be in our manifesto. The universal credit system is inherently bad for people. Some people do gain, yes, but on average they don't. They lose out. The complexities are very difficult for people to manage, and we have endless examples of people being deprived of money and having to, or being given loans which are then clawed back over the next few months by the system. It's not been put into place in a good way, and it should be scrapped, and we will scrap it. But today we have a series of administrative changes to be brought in April, and I hope everybody will support them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dazelle? Do you have 5 minutes?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I understand it was a Liberal Democrat administration which originally introduced the council tax reduction scheme in this city. We're pleased that the current ruling group has kept it as one of the most generous in the country. As a council, there are restrictions in what we can do, but this council tax relief is one way in which we provide important financial support to the members of our community who need it most. It is therefore essential that in the face of the deeply flawed universal credit reforms, we continue to protect this essential scheme from the issues raised by Councillor Robertson. I'd like to thank the officers for the work they've performed and for the reports presented here today. We think they have identified the best available solution, and we are happy to support the recommendations. Thank you.
Is there a debate? No? Okay. Councillor Robinson, do you wish to have the right to reply? No? Okay, thank you. I will now go to the vote. Please, can I see those in favour of the recommendation? Thank you. We'll now go to agenda item 5C on page 157 to 176. Recommendations of the Executive Council for Finance and Resources for the Treasury Management Half-Yearly Update Report 2019 to 20. Does Councillor Robertson wish to introduce this item?
No thanks, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to deal with them. It's dealt with at S&R and in detail.
Okay, thank you. Is there any debate? No? Okay. So, Councillor Robinson, you don't want to? No? Okay. Okay. I will now go to the vote. Please, can I see those in favour of the recommendation?
24.
Okay. Is that all right? Yeah. Okay. And those against? And those abstaining? Okay, thank you. Okay, we now turn to agenda item 5D on page 177 to 230. Recommendation of the Executive Council for Finance and Resource for the General Fund Medium-Term Financial Strategy. Councillor Robertson, do you wish to introduce this item?
I do, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, you have up to 10 minutes.
Thank you. All right, well, we produce two main financial documents each year, the budget setting report and this, the medium-term financial strategy. Now, the budget is, of course, the crucial one because when agreed by the Council, it delegates to the officers authority to run the Council and provide the services to the City and apply the charges and fees in accordance with that budget. So, while not fundamental, the medium-term financial strategy fulfills an important role in drawing together a review of financial information available and assumptions and forecasts into the future. And this then produces a basis on which to prepare the budget for the year ahead. Now, in more normal times, we would hope at this point we would have some certainty of the financial settlement to be available to us by the government for the next year, 2020-2021. And the extent to which any increase in council tax we may propose to make will be restricted by capping, for instance. We ought to know that by now, but of course we don't. And there is, in practice, considerable uncertainty, even more than in previous years. Some of this has been because various reviews and consultations on possible changes in policy are still awaiting completion. Not that there has been any certainty as to the result of those reviews in any case. The political dogma of the Conservatives has usually been given priority over the application of objectivity. So, for instance, the so-called fair funding review increasingly appears to be heading towards applying a very unfair redistribution of funding towards the shires and away from the big cities. But of course we have actually no idea who will be running the country by next February when we will debate and set our budget for that year ahead. The country has now suffered for over 9 years from the imposition of the austerity policy of successive governments. Public services in Cambridge have been cut year after year, while at the same time the Tories have largely let market forces dictate rising costs. Failing to regulate the markets, such as energy and private rented housing, has brought great hardship to a lot of people, including by forcing public sector workers to accept far lower wages, and especially when coupled with cuts in welfare benefits. National evidence suggests that these cuts have hit low-income households far more than those on higher incomes. And the gap in wealth between rich and poor has widened significantly over the last 9 years. Unfortunately, Cambridge is known to have one of the greatest inequalities of any city in the whole country. Parts of our city include people of great wealth, while nearby there are pockets of people in poverty and severe deprivation. And we are determined that those people will continue to be a core target for delivery of council services. The poorest in our city need direct assistance and support from us, and we will also help them through funding community organisations and through our extra housing investment. And everyone in Cambridge deserves the opportunity to share in the city's growing prosperity. The September budget claims from the Chancellor of the Exchequer of extra billions for councils are not backed by the reality of the situation, with near nil benefit or extra funds for Cambridge City Council residents. The announcements made by the Chancellor of the Exchequer of extra billions for local government will in reality be much smaller figures than he said. Although 1 billion extra will be provided for social care, which is generally needed by authorities like the County Council who provide those services, the expectation is that it will be the council taxpayers who will be asked to contribute a further £500 million for this work through a further adult care precept of 2% on top of the main precept. Once again, the Conservative government is relying on regressive types of taxation, in this case council tax, which every household has to pay, rather than progressive taxes such as income tax and corporation tax, where those who earn more pay more. This is the way the Tories have structured their tax system, and why we desperately need a Labour government, a government which would apply much fairer tax systems. From 2020-2021, too many 20s, right. From next year, only 300 million is to be made available to increase baseline funding of local authorities. And Cambridge City Council does not expect to receive a penny of this, as we've already had our grant cut to zero. It's possible we may get a small increase in funding for work to combat rough sleeping and homelessness, but as the total budget for the whole country is only 54 million, we don't expect to get very much. Unfortunately, the new Chancellor is no better than his predecessor in continuing the Conservatives' austerity agenda and seeking to hide it under the cloak of claiming generosity of funding. Since publishing our medium-term financial strategy, we have learned that the remaining form of government funding we have been getting, New Homes Bonus, is to be ended. Although we will be getting roughly the same New Homes Bonus in the year ahead, it will be halved after that for 2022-23, and then halved again in 22-23, and then ended completely. The New Homes Bonus we expect to get next year is around 5.5 million. So that's the scale of what we're going to lose each year in the future. So this is the context within which we will develop our financial plans, a context in which we can expect limited funding to be provided by the government, so that developing other income streams will become even more important than it has been over the past few years. This medium-term financial strategy identifies the pressures we will face in the years ahead, and it will enable us to plan the funding of important new services and initiatives, plan the finding of savings, and plan the increasing of income streams. It will also enable us to invest for the support into the future of services we provide, to protect and enhance the environment of Cambridge, to help the economic development of our city and to assist in moving it towards a net zero carbon position. The medium-term financial strategy will be used to help draw together the budget setting report for next year, which will be published in January. The strategy, though, embraces the core financial objectives of this Council: sound and prudent financial management, the minimisation of the need for cuts to services, investment for the future, and a fairer and more equal city, a city we are proud to serve. I present to you the medium-term financial strategy.
Thank you. Councillor Dizal, do you want to speak now?
Yeah, thank you.
You have
Madam
10
Mayor.
minutes, okay.
I won't need that.
Okay.
I would obviously also like to thank the officers for the work undertaken to prepare this report. Although there are significant gaps developing in our longer-term forward plan, as is explained in the document and has been explained by Councillor Robertson, this is primarily due to failures of the Conservative government that I cannot blame this ruling group for. In large part due to the paralysis of national government by Brexit, Westminster has fundamentally failed to provide clarity regarding the future of local government funding, and this understandably means that a prudent approach is being recommended in this instance. Now, I think the impact of this is clearly illustrated in section 7 of the report. It shows £18 million worth of reserves being carried forward at the moment going into 21-22. And fundamentally, with no plan to spend down at the moment to the target levels of 6.6 million. Given the material uncertainties outlined in the document that are undoubtedly true, I cannot really criticise that. I think it probably is necessary, but just gives another illustration of the continuing costs of Brexit as it generates such uncertainties and ties up key funding across the country. Sadly, the scale of that uncertainty also undermines the inherent value of this document at this time. If such uncertainty continues next year, then I do ask that additional details are provided, like we have in Appendix B, that just gives us some view of the additional reserves we're carrying above the minimum requirements that we do calculate. Meanwhile, on the capital side, I think most of those areas have already been discussed in some detail at Scrutiny Committee. I don't see any reason to further litigate them in this forum, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any debate? No? Okay. Councillor Robinson, did you want to come back?
No, fine, thanks, that's enough, I think.
Okay, lovely. Okay, we will now go to the vote. Please, can I see those in favour of the recommendations?
24.
Those against?
0.
Those abstaining?
14.
Okay, thank you. We now turn to item 6A of the agenda. Review of the officer employment procedure rules on pages 231 to 246 of the agenda. Is there any debate? No? Okay. Councillor Dizal, did you want to say anything? You have 5 minutes.
Fundamentally, this is something we discussed back in the summer. It makes perfect sense to us. We think it's a very sensible recommendation, and we will be supporting it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Macpherson, do you wish to have a right of reply of anything?
You'll be glad to hear. Nothing to report, madam.
Okay, thank you. So we'll now go to the vote. Please, can I see those in favour of the recommendations?
Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now go to agenda item 7. Oral questions, which starts on page 19 of your information pack. This item will last a maximum of 30 minutes. The Executive Councillor, Chair or nominee will have up to 2 minutes to reply. The questionnaire We'll then have 2 minutes to put a supplementary question or to seek clarification of the response to the original question. The Executive Councillor, Chair or nominee will have a further 2 minutes to reply to the supplementary question. At the conclusion of 30 minutes, those that have not answered may provide a written response to the member who has put the question. Councillor Smart has the first question.
Question 1, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The first Street Aid Week began on the 14th of October and runs until this Friday. The aim being to raise awareness of street aid within key audiences in Cambridge, the general public, through a range of events and communications. There is a fundraising target for the week of £2,500. The coordinator, Joe Davies-Warner, has planned key activities which include, on Monday, marking the start of the week with the unveiling of the Street Aid Week banner at the Guildhall, with a photo call and fundraising target prop. On Tuesday, a stall took place at the Grand Arcade to promote the contactless terminal there. On Wednesday, an event at St Paul's Church to launch their contactless terminal and generally raise awareness of street aid. Thursday and Friday, leaflets were handed out at key points across the city, including the train stations and the Market Square. And tomorrow, there will be some press activity to draw attention to the fact that there will be a further 8 contactless terminals at council car parks and co-op stores across the city. In addition, Go Glass are supporting Street Aid Week by selling individually designed sun catchers during the week to raise funds, and other events have been organised by volunteers in their workplace or universities. For example, bake sales and formal college dinners. Our customer service centre are also running a raffle. Communication about the event has been through press releases, radio ads on buses and online activity via our Twitter and Facebook feeds, the Cambridge Matters magazine, through the Cambridgeshire Community Foundation and the Cambridge Bid newsletter. Fundraising activity will continue once the week comes to a close. For example, in November, a Salida will take place with the proceeds going towards street aid. Tickets will be available via Eventbrite and will be also promoted by the street aid champions and volunteers.
Okay, Councillor Smart, did you want to?
Yeah, I think this is a really good thing, Street Aid. I'm really pleased it's doing so well. I thought I saw somewhere that it had been sort of taken up by somewhere else as well. They were looking at it anyway. So maybe you could tell us who that is. And yeah, I mean, just on a personal note, I've never really, bit of an odd thing to say, but I've never really found it very comfortable giving money to people on the street. I think probably my upbringing, my parents wouldn't have given money in that way because they had quite a hard upbringing themselves, so it just wasn't in their sort of the way they did things. But with Street Aid, I feel much more comfortable about that, and I feel also comfortable about recommending it to other people. And, you know, when you sort of do these things where you get sponsored and all that online and everything, giving the money to this charity, because I feel this is one of our local charities now that, you know, we can really push. So well done to all the officers and everyone concerned. And, yeah, who was the other authority that was interested in doing it?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I understand that Harrogate is the local authority in question, and I believe we've also had queries from other councils up and down the country wanting to take the model that we have pioneered forward for them. In terms of what Councillor Smart says about what Street Aid is all about, I do agree with him that the £3 donation via a contactless terminal or via the website is a very good way of actually making your own personal contribution to supporting those who are down on their luck, who are feel shut out of society and feel that they have no way of coming back into society, as it were. We've raised over £60,000 since we put together Street Aid in 2016, with I think 250 grants of up to £750 being given out to people who just need a little bit of an extra bit of support in reintegrating back into society, as I said. For instance, we've given money to people for towards a qualification, towards a suit for a job interview and computer equipment and so forth. Really useful tools in actually helping people have the ability and the confidence to make a second go of things. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Sherwood?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question 2, please.
Thank you to Councillor Shield for his question. I am not Anna Smith, but I will be answering her questions this evening. So apologies if the answer is not quite as granular as Councillor Anna Smith would provide. So we continue to review how best we can raise the capacity of individuals and communities in the city by interventions. And on the order paper for the council today, we've got the 2020 to 23 food poverty strategy, and that's one of the key elements. So one example of an initiative has been the cookery skills classes, Councillor Shield. They've been an excellent way that Cambridge Sustainable Food have been able to complement other initiatives and really help people learn how to cook and to cook on a low income. Our digital inclusion project, which is another example where we've supported North Cambridge Community Partnership, and they've established a whole range of initiatives in terms of digital inclusion. It helps a lot of our tenants, and it also extends the range of people in the city who nowadays need to use IT because that's the only way a lot of organisations will talk to them. But in King's Hedges, we've got a new code club that's brought in extra IT equipment. There's links with Raspberry Pi, and there's now sessions being run by local volunteers. Finally, I'll just reference that there's a whole range of council staff who are delivering anti-poverty initiatives right across every department: housing, community services, revenues and benefits, environmental services. We do aim to help those vulnerable people in our community who need that help the most.
Did you want to do a supplementary?
Very quickly, I'd like to thank the leader for his replies, and I'd like to single out for a special thank you the digital inclusion work, in that my residents in Albury have benefited directly from that help. And it's not just about digital inclusion, it's also about making sure that there is no digital exclusion, which is not quite the same thing. After all, sometimes people are in need of paper copies of forms, and this council has always been able to offer that.
Thank you, and we'll pass that on. I think we should thank the volunteers that have made that initiative really successful. It's got a total energy. It gets out into the parts of the community that really have been digitally excluded, and a lot of people have gained from it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pippas?
Question number 3.
We've been working closely with the County Council and Police to progress this scheme. It's taken some time to ensure that concerns raised around disabled parking and deliveries could be addressed properly. And we have now applied to the County Council for an order to close King's Parade and for the installation of a new disabled parking on Champion Street to be put into place. We expect the County Council to determine this application soon, and once this has happened, we will be able to agree an installation date. Officers have undertaken to brief ward councillors, local businesses, colleges and other residents once the order has been determined.
Councillor Pippas?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Executive Councillor. I think you already tried to answer some of the people who will be affected, and we all know that by introducing the security barriers, a number of groups of people will be at disadvantage by this introduction. The question I had as supplementary is what measures are you proposing to help mitigate the impacts on the following groups which will be affected by this? You already mentioned about the disabled people. Clearly, you're going to lose a lot of parking spaces there, and many disabled people use that place to park, to go shopping, but also to go to Grace St. Mary's Church, and that would be a great loss. But if I understood correctly, you're taking action towards mitigating the impacts on that. The second group of people who will be affected are the shop owners, and the shop owners have believe that they need to have a good flow of people going through to maintain their businesses. They need their deliveries to be delivered on time, and if we're taking those delivery areas, that's going to be a problem. And also they think the time that the barrier is going to be closed is the busiest time that they want customers. And the other thing I was going to ask Executive Councillor is, have we taken any measures to mitigate the impact it's going to have on cyclists? Thank you.
You have 2 minutes, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. As you say, with the disabled, we've been very concerned to make sure that the 10 or so parking spaces that have been available for disabled parking would be replaced by parking as close as possible. Those are all in Trumpington Street and at the end of Bennett Street. However, I could point out that anybody with a blue badge can actually park in the Market Square at any time if there's space, and in outside the Senate House as well. So I think particularly those who are going to church, if they've got a blue badge, will be able to continue to park there anyway. Shop owners, yes. Well, anybody who's in a pedestrian area is a shopkeeper in a pedestrian area has to recognise they have to make special arrangements for deliveries. This is certainly true of other parts of the city centre, which are closed for traffic from 10 in the morning till 4 at night in the afternoon. The shopkeepers on King's Parade will have to recognise that they will need to get their deliveries in before the gate is shut in the morning. The gate will be open, the main gate of the barrier will be open in the morning when there's less pedestrians around on King's Parade, and will enable the cyclists to pass through there. The main bulk of the cyclists are at 9 o'clock, as everybody knows. They're always late for lectures and in a hurry, I know. So the space available for cycling the rest of the day is limited, but during the morning it will be open for them to pass through. So we recognise the problems, but we have been warned that there's a threat, and we have to recognise that threat. Some people will be inconvenienced, but we have to recognise that the convenience is not the most important factor sometimes. Safety is very important as well.
Okay. Councillor McGoty.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question 4.
The Streets and Open Spaces Community Engagement Service has been running for just over 12 months now and includes a team leader, 4 area rangers and a local nature reserve ranger. Officers undertake a raft of duties on a daily basis, which include engaging with existing volunteers under the Council's corporate volunteer policy, engaging with local community groups to support environmental projects, leading on the delivery of local and national behaviour change campaigns across the city, undertaking and developing educational environmental activities with schools and youth groups across the city, developing and delivering volunteering opportunities and activities across the city, working to support friends of groups, help to deliver and support community clear-up days, tag and remove abandoned bikes and shopping trolleys across the city, and to organise and deliver community payback works across the city. Our local nature reserve ranger has a specialist role and works in conjunction with our biodiversity officer to implement local nature reserve site management plans, including monitoring to help meet targets for biodiversity and nature conservation, and working with volunteers and friends of groups. Since the group has been in place, we have achieved improvements across the city, and just some of the works completed include the following: organisation and delivery of the Great British Spring Clean during March and April this year, working in partnership with Cambridge Hedgehogs to promote Hedgehog Awareness Week in May this year, and ongoing commitments to provide hedgehog holes across the city, delivery of school talks and litter picks to schools across the city relating to environmental crime, delivery of We're Watching You dog fouling campaign in October last year. We continue to remove shopping trolleys and abandoned bikes across the city and donate unwanted bikes to OWL. and there's a lot more.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At the January the 18th, 2018 meeting of the Community Services Scrutiny Committee, the then Executive Councillor for Streets and Open Spaces agreed to strip out £230,000 of the annual budget for the vital services that provide the residents with a clean and pleasant city to live in, Madam Mayor. And opposition councillors were told then, and on many occasions since, that the so-called service transformation would save money whilst providing residents with the exact same level of service. An incredible claim, given that the fantastic City Ranger service, relied upon by so many residents as a responsive, flexible and dedicated team, who would paper over the cracks of an already reduced maintenance offering, were to be disbanded. And the promise made to me time and again since was that the former activities of the City Rangers would be transferred to an improved streets and open spaces operations team. But as time passes, the reality of this claim becomes embarrassingly apparent, Madam Mayor. A member of the public recently contacted me to deal with some overhanging shrubbery that's been obstructing a pavement in Queen Edith's. And her concern was not for herself, Madam Mayor, but for a blind neighbour who uses the pavement daily. A reasonable and very considerate request, I thought, and one which I would have been able to deal with in the past. But those days are over, it would seem, because the reply I received from the operations team informed me that because the plants originate on private property, the administration's policy no longer addresses the issue of them obstructing the streets. We used to provide the service through the Ranger team, but as we've seen, that doesn't exist anymore, Madam Mayor. So would the Executive Councillor now like to take the opportunity to defend the huge cuts in services made last year and to explain to my blind and vision impaired residents how they are supposed to navigate their own neighbourhood with the confidence and independence they once enjoyed? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I'd just like to say, in the last year, we have not received any complaints about the service structure. We have received nothing but compliments and positive comments about the work done and what we are able to deliver and opportunities we can provide. There are a few remaining comments or queries from the public about the cutting of bike locks, which was terminated in early 2018 before the teams were in place, which the City Rangers used to do, and the people are now signposted to locksmiths, but we have had no formal complaints.
Thank you. Councillor O'Reilly. Oh, wake up.
Madam Mayor, question 5, please.
As was discussed by the Scrutiny Committee, the Council has learnt a number of important lessons from the Cambridge Live Review that will inform the Council going forward. These include how important it is, Mayor, to be clear about the reasons for creating the trusts and obviously reviewing the nature of the business plans that we created at its inception and we may consider in the future. As the report also concludes, it's not uncommon that trusts that councils in other parts of the country have set up have had similar issues, and others have struggled also to deliver savings, as was the aim in this project. The delicate balance between supporting an arm's-length body to develop and allow it to be independent is also something that took time, including at the Cambridge Live end, and was a challenge in maintaining both the skill and the goodwill of the joint work that needs to be delivered. And the final lesson, which we particularly identify, is that we have to be clear about the role councillors play and are asked to play on these boards. I do pay tribute to two councillors at the end, including Councillor Benstead on this side, but the then Councillor for Castle as well. But before, it wasn't really clear to councillors what their role was, and that needs to be changed if there are future trusts. In talking, I do want to pay tribute, Mayor, to the staff of Cambridge Live and of the Council. So despite a complicated transition, we had a wonderful folk festival, which I think you attended on the Sunday, and we're also running a whole programme of events in the Corn Exchange in a way that's not been interrupted. So I particularly pay tribute to the Cambridge Live staff who came back to this council. They effected a smooth transition.
Councillor O'Reilly, do you have a supplementary? You have 2 minutes.
Very tempted to ask a supplementary, Madam Mayor, but given that the leader has stepped in at short notice to cover this and has also told me he'll regard it as a hostile act, I shan't.
Councillor Todd Jones.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, question 6, the Executive Council for Housing.
When putting together revised proposals for the Meadows and Buchan Street, we listened carefully to what residents' views following the consultation on the previous plans, as we said we would. Of course, building new council homes is a key priority for this council, but we are committed to doing this in a way that works for the whole community. Local ward councillors and I have pressed for the need to ensure that any open space lost is kept to an absolute minimum, and whilst maximising the potential for the site to deliver the council homes this city needs with a new modern community centre to serve King's Hedges and North Cambridge. So I'm pleased to report that we now have a set of revised plans that will deliver all of these objectives. We are still proposing over 100 new sustainable council homes, as mentioned earlier, 35 to 40% above national standards in terms of sustainability, but also have managed to cut the amount of open space lost at the Meadows to roughly half of what was originally intended. 92% will be retained. One of the other concerns about the original plans was that the proposed 5-storey buildings were too high and overbearing. We have asked the architects to look at revising this, and they have. The units nearest to the existing housing in Daisy Close and surrounding streets are now staggered at 3 and 4 stories respectively. The 6-storey unit will be the furthest corner of the site to minimise its impact. And unlike in the previous plans, we've also made sure that the London plane trees along St Catherine's Road and at the Arbury Road junction will be retained, which will also help to anchor the new buildings into the existing street and landscape.
Thank you. Did you have a supplementary, Councillor Todd Jones?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just very briefly, would the Executive Council like to comment on the consultation process, which I think was also significantly better, and I got lots of positive response about both the consultation events, the Meadows on the 1st of October and Buchan Street on the 4th of October. Many thousands of leaflets were delivered, and I've had lots of comments on the actual consultation from residents in Arbury. I'm sure that's the same in King's Hedges too. Comment forms are still going in. I know this from residents who got back to me, and that's open until the 25th of October. But I think that both the plans and the consultation, the whole process has been very widely commented on as very successful.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, so just looking at the data, for the first public consultation event, we had 88 attendees, and at the second one at Buchan Street, we had 43, which is approximately double compared to the last time that we had a set of consultations. And it's still open, and we invite very much as many comments as possible to come in. So please do so. If anyone's listening or watching, the website is open until I think next week for you to ensure that you have a role to play in shaping the plans going forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Gearing?
Question 7.
Yes, the water fountains and very important in public open spaces in connection with going for carbon neutrality. The Council earlier this week has signed up to the Cambridge Plastic Pledge, which encourages every business and organisation in Cambridge to make a change to reduce the amount of single-use plastics they use. The Council is supporting this pledge in a number of ways, including helping with the National Refill campaign. This campaign is promoting over 110 free drinking water taps and fountains in Cambridge, including those provided by the Council in its public buildings, parks and open spaces, such as a drinking fountain recently installed at Parker's Piece. We also have invested in 3 new water points in our parks, 2 on Parker's Piece and 1 on Jesus Green, and these help reduce plastic usage at major events such as the Big Weekend, the Country Fair, and at a range of other smaller scale planned events. We also have a water point fountain in the Lion Yard and a refill point in the Market Square. Going forward, all new and refurbished community buildings will have refill points. The most recent round of EIPs sought out suggestions for new public water points as a strategic priority. A suggestion from a Castle Ward councillor for a facility as part of a broader enhancements at Histon Road Recreation Ground will be considered at the West Central Area Committee in December. A further scheme is being developed for the Midsummer Common Orchard using S106 monies following a grant application approved in June this year.
So this is the water fountain version of if you need a toilet, use a pub. I'm really shocked. I'm shocked by the lack of action on behalf of your council. You promised at an election event that Lammas Land would have a water fountain by the summer. You promised it again at the last council after you were reminded that for 3 years no functioning water fountain has been installed in Lammas Land. And now the residents of Newnham learn from you that it's not even in the council's pipeline. What are you doing?
Councillor Thornton, you have 2 minutes.
I really do recommend the refill app. It will show that the kiosk on Lammas Land is actually part of that skill, and it has been used by the public to refill bottles during opening hours. Fortunately, it is closed now, as we know, for winter. So we are investigating the provision of a permanent external water point facility at Lammas Land kiosk, and if it's considered viable, it will be part of the latest round, the next round of the EIP funding.
Thank you. Councillor Pora?
Question 8, please, Madam Mayor.
Yes, I'm very keen to reduce congestion and all forms of pollution in the city, particularly air pollution. I believe that Cambridge needs a clean air zone. My preferred plan would be a stepped programme covering just buses, taxis and coaches initially, but then as time goes on, more vehicles will be included with stricter zero emission requirements. This plan would improve air quality in the city, whilst giving businesses, individuals and the bus company or bus companies, depending on our future, clarity for their future plans, but it would prompt them when they were renewing their vehicles, it would push them into renewing them with low or zero emission vehicles. However, I would like to say that this debate is often portrayed as a negative, i.e. stopping people from the freedom of driving their cars. However, I think we should be seeing it more as a positive, that we're moving towards a city that prioritises health and well-being of people. Active travel, such as walking and cycling, but also using public transport like buses, actually has many real benefits, not just to physical, but also to mental health. I am, unlike some of the members opposite, in favour of increased pedestrianisation. Less cars not only means that it is safer and nicer for pedestrians, but also there's more space for things like trees. We could have planters with flowers and benches.
Councillor Pora?
Thank you very much. I'm quite in favour of pedestrianisation as well. Thank you very much. I just actually wanted to follow, obviously I agree, air pollution is a really high priority. Obviously the recent licensing committee, we've kept our taxes to that. What I did want to ask about was the unanimous support of the last council on page 9 of the minutes about the car-free day. Obviously, I totally appreciate that is county council, but I'd be really grateful to find out exactly what's been going on in terms of how we followed up on that, whether we had anything back from county about having the car-free day, because I note we missed the date in September when they were proposing it, and also, as it was explicitly raised by members of the public, what the executive councillor and the rest of us can do to push that forward, because I think that would be a really important way of looking at the different levels of air pollution if we are able to engineer that. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just referring to King's Parade when I said you weren't in favour of pedestrianisation. Car-free day. We have been, as I said, we said previously, Labour councillors are in support of a car-free day and have been for a couple of years. As you mentioned, it is the county council. What have I done since then? I have emailed Councillor Shooter, again, I've spoken to him quite a lot about this. I've emailed him again. He has said that he would be in favour if the bid are in favour. And the bid are in favour because, well, for a variety of reasons. So, although the county are dragging their heels, I'm sure at some point one day there will be an organised car-free day in Cambridge and we will all be able to enjoy car-free streets.
You've done very well there. We've come to 29 minutes and 49 seconds. So I'm afraid any questions that haven't been answered, please, could the relevant people answer them? Okay, email everyone. Thank you very much. That was a very good debate. Anyway, I call on Councillor Bick to move the motion cutbacks in hostel provisions for rough sleepers found on pages 2 and 3 of your agenda. Do you have a seconder? You have 10 minutes between you.
And there is Councillor Porra. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am a firm believer in the contribution that Housing First can play in helping rough sleepers off our streets. It's why, when County Councillor Harrison and I wrote our report after studying this subject last year, we made it one of our top recommendations. So it's entirely welcome that this council, together with the County Council, has committed to expand on the tiny toe put in the water, getting on, I think, for 10 years ago, in the form of 2 training flats, so-called, provided by Cambridge Housing Society. Most experience with Housing First in the UK has found that it fills an important gap, namely for rough sleepers who repeatedly fall in and out of the hostel system, individuals who don't respond to the hostel offering, whether it's the discipline it necessarily carries with it, or the living at close quarters with others facing the same challenges. This is transparently a significant gap here in Cambridge, given the histories of many of the individuals to be found on our streets, day and night, often stretching over lengthy periods, the same individuals. The sooner we can get this extra provision from Housing First, the better. The principle of Housing First is that a homeless person would be provided with a normal tenancy, affordable from benefits, on an unconditional basis, their own front door, with intensive, personalised visiting support to help address what would otherwise be their obstacle to mainstream housing, typically and very commonly an addiction or a mental health problem, or both, and that support for as long as it's needed. A normal tenancy like this, but with much less visiting support, would generally be the goal only after those issues had been got under control through the hostel system. That is the key difference between the two approaches. It's important to note that whereas some individuals can't and don't prosper in the hostel system, others do, expressly because they benefit from the structure it offers and the companionship of being with others, exactly the other side of the same coin. People are simply different. One consequence of not having enough hostel spaces is the risk of not being able to meet the needs of individuals in a way that's effective for them. A risk of using Housing First for inappropriate cases in a way which reduces the quality of life of other surrounding tenants and residents, making it difficult in practice to find acceptable, sustainable tenancies. And another danger is that we end up by increasing the number of people sleeping on the streets rather than reducing it. And these should be real concerns for us in all parts of the city, not just in places which experience lots of rough sleeping. A quick look on the streets and a look at the occupancy of hostels in the city tells us that we are much more likely today to have a total under-provision than a total over-provision of accommodation for rough sleepers. So reducing hostel provision is a very dangerous step to take. But it is especially dangerous when it's the only hostel in the city, Willow Walk, which accommodates rough sleepers who have the highest level of needs, and it's that is proposed to be closed. And of this, I'm pretty convinced. Highest level of needs does not simply or easily translate to suitable candidate for Housing First. As the local manager of Riverside Housing, which owns Willow Walk, said to me, even if you wanted to reduce services, why would you choose to shut down the services for your clients with the very highest level of support needs? Why would you? Professionals who currently refer clients to Willow Walk, who have approached me, are worried that there will not be suitable place for their most challenging cases, some of which would be in no way suitable for Housing First accommodation. One of the most common criteria for referring an individual to Housing First accommodation from experience elsewhere is knowledge of them from a track record of abortive stays in hostels, providing the evidence of entrenched rough sleeping. One might ask how such an assessment could be so easily made when there is no hostel for people to fall in and out of, and how we would actually gain that experience of individuals without that facility being there. Now, Madam Mayor, this motion makes an initial, modest, rational request that we ask the County Council to produce a needs analysis and a clear statement of the future mix of supported accommodation for rough sleepers that they are working towards, Housing First, hostels, or anything else, showing how that future picture meets the assessed needs. This has not been prepared to my knowledge, and it has certainly not been published or discussed in public. Until they have done this, to this council's satisfaction as their partner, they should withdraw their intention, already communicated to Riverside Housing, to decommission their Willow Walk hostel. Otherwise, that service and its staff remain blighted in their attempt to continue delivering on this, their very challenging existing mission until 2021. Madam Mayor, it's an absurd situation that Riverside, who I have no reason to blame as an organisation one bit, may need to resort to using the Willow Walk hostel that they own for homeless people from London, while we as a city have our hands more than full, I think we can all agree, with our own problem in Cambridge. I am mystified by the amendment to this motion. It effectively confirms my contention about the County Council's movement of money from hostels to Housing First, at the same time as saying that the one is not funded from the other, which is undeniably the plan. And the amendment adopts a curious defensive stance when no one is actually criticising members opposite. If you haven't been hit, it really is quite confusing if you act wounded. The removal of the references to the fears of the professionals, the police, and the public, to me is inexplicable, unless you're simply not talking and listening to them, as I try to do. So purely on the basis of the amendment, I'm left asking if there is more involvement in the County Council's plans than meets the eye, which is not where I started out when proposing this motion. So I'm genuinely wondering if this amendment is actually serving your purposes well. My motion is about doing the best we can for single homeless people and those who live around them in this city. It's an ongoing, huge challenge, and I'm asking for support for members on all sides of this chamber in relation to a current policy question of extreme importance on a subject that I've personally spent some time studying. It would be really wonderful if you could treat it in that way. Thank you.
Councillor Perra, you have 1 minute. No, 52 seconds. Oh, sorry, 52 seconds, sorry.
May I reserve my right to speak at the end? Would that be okay? Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Johnson has given notice of an amendment which is on page 13 of the information pack. Councillor Sargent will second the amendment. You have 10 minutes between you. Councillor Johnson, do you want to speak now?
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Mayor. First things first, this is not meant to be a wrecking amendment. In fact, it leaves several of the key points contained within Councillor Bick's motion relatively unscathed. For instance, we agree that when considering the support available for vulnerable rough sleepers with high needs, housing first and hostel accommodation are not necessarily mutually exclusive options. Whilst evidence from studies demonstrate that the likelihood for someone with acute and long-term needs to successfully hold down self-contained accommodation, breaking the cycle of homelessness, is improved under Housing First. Compared to the hostel system, hostels remain strategically important in helping people come off the streets. Indeed, Housing First is not intended to replace the hostel system, but merely, as Councillor Bick said, provide an alternative means of support for those who have found it challenging to successfully integrate into mainstream housing. The amendment reflects this by making clear that, at least from the City Council's perspective, the expansion of Housing First is not dependent on the possible decommissioning of Willow Walk. The amendment also makes clear that we too, of course, are concerned with the impact of the possible decommissioning of Willow Walk, amongst other cuts that have been either followed through by the County Council or deferred on vulnerable people, which links to the point just made about ensuring that there remains a plurality of support options available for rough sleepers and those who are homeless. A further addition is inserted into the concluding paragraph to make clear that, yes, decisions should be set aside until a full needs analysis is carried out. But the ideal way forward would be for the County Council to take note of conclusions generated by our forthcoming revised homelessness and rough sleeping strategy, which should be in place by the midpoint of next year. Indeed, we hope and expect that the County Council will constructively participate in helping us draft the strategy. However, I do have to use the opportunity, I'm afraid, Madam Mayor, presented in this motion to make the critical point that whilst we oppose the County Council's cuts, a decade of austerity, sadly, I'm afraid, overseen by the Liberal Democrats as well as the Tories, has led to huge challenges for local authorities, for one, and second, creating the conditions for the huge 165% rise across the country in rough sleeping since 2010. So I would trust that colleagues will support the amendment.
Councillor Sargent?
I'll wait, Mayor, if I may. How long have I got? 7:20. Okay.
7 minutes, 20 seconds. Okay, is there any debate? No debate. Okay then, so we'll go back to Councillor Bick. Sorry, Councillor Parra. You have, what was it? 52 seconds.
Right, I'll be really quick. I would like to welcome this motion in its unamended form. Obviously, I want to highlight the importance of Willow Walk. It's in my ward, and the staff do an amazing job supporting some of our most vulnerable residents. This is a valuable asset. It's really important for our homeless community, and we do need an evidence-led review taking into account the good practice around Housing First. We need to ensure this happens before we lose this provision. I am disappointed in the amendment, As you know, I think we agree on this. I don't like politics where we play each off against each other when we don't need to. Well, I'm trying. Consensus politics is what I like, where we do agree. So I hope that everyone will support this motion unamended, because I think it will provide a really valuable service to our community to have this reviewed and Willow Walk kept as it is. Thank you.
Well done, 50 seconds. Okay. Yeah. Councillor Sargent?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, it's obviously, this is a major issue in the city, and much as I'm not sympathetic to the County Council, I am sympathetic to the fact of all the cuts they've had for the last 9 years. I know Councillor Bick is going to yawn at that comment, but actually it was 2003 when the Labour government brought in the housing-related support grant, and it was during their time in government that that support was taken into the government support grant, and we all know where that went. So the County Council have lost, in the last 4 years, 50 million in government support grant, let alone the fact that many of the reasons for rough sleeping have been as a result of the things that were triggered when the party opposite was running the government with the Tories. So we do need to address this issue. It has to be a balanced approach. As Councillor Bick said, you know, there are different needs for different people. And we do need to put pressure on the County Council to provide the necessary, and we will work in partnership with the County Council, but we'll only really be able to move this forward with an incoming Labour government. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Johnson, you have 3 minutes. No? Councillor Bick, you have 3 minutes.
I have nothing more to say. I would urge members to rise above the discussion about austerity, which never ends. I think it's well acknowledged. It's well acknowledged on our side to be an important factor in the difficulty providing public services over the last 10 years. We could argue for a long time about the need for that. But the issue I think that members opposite should sometimes consider is in their incantations about that they are not hiding some things that they could do themselves. That is the point that we raise this subject today for what we in this chamber can do. We can make lots of comments about other people. We have an important relationship with the County Council and we should make it work for us. This is a practical motion. It's a pity that you intend to amend it, but I would urge members to support the ultimate motion.
Okay, I will now go to the vote. Please, can I see those in favour of the amendment?
So that's 23.
Okay. And those against?
So that's 15.
Okay. I will now go to the vote for the motion as amended. Please, can I see those in favour?
So that's unanimous.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll now turn to agenda item 10. I call on Councillor McGurty to move this recycling centres motion found on page 3 of your agenda. I understand that Councillor Martinelli, you have 10 minutes between you. So, Councillor McGurty, please address
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just wait while the rest of the group leaves the chamber. Take your time, Councillor Sargent.
Madam Mayor,
Okay, I think they're all staying for the moment. Madam Mayor, Cambridge is experiencing an epidemic of fly tipping, and it is getting worse, and it has been getting worse, and it's now at an intolerable level. I've residents regularly writing to me, desperate for our neighbourhood recycling centre to be cleaned and cleared up when it's once again been neglected and become a tempting target for fly tipping. We all know that the best way to combat graffiti is to clean it off the minute it goes up, and so it is with recycling points when they are left unloved and in a mess, and the problem quickly escalates. And the thing that really gets my goat, Madam Mayor, if I may, is that the contamination of legitimate recycling, carefully separated and responsibly disposed of by members of the public, ends up in landfill. We can do better. So, how do we stop fly tipping and the contamination of recycling points? Well, the Council's approach has been to simply close 7 recycling points to dry mixed recycling, which I might compare to taking our ball back and going home. Is that really constructive, Madam Mayor? So, if you live in Arbury, Coleridge, Cherry Hinton, Romsey, Trumpington or Abbey, you now have to travel significantly further to dispose of your recyclable materials which are not appropriate for curbside collection. And is it any wonder that the few remaining sites are over capacity and in a horrendous mess by collection day? But the thing that most concerns me, Madam Mayor, is that when I try to study the relationship between reduced recycling facilities and increased fly tipping, it becomes clear that because one is the responsibility of the waste service and the other is dealt with by the streets and open spaces, that it's not even being looked at. So it seems as if the council pulls a policy lever over here but ignores the possible impact because that's in a different department. Is that how a well-run organisation behaves, Madam Mayor? I'm asking the Executive Councillor to bring to committee a report which attempts to ascertain whether the reduction in recycling facilities has negatively impacted the lives of our residents by encouraging or exacerbating the problem of fly tipping across the city. And therefore I urge members to pass the motion as proposed and unamended. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Martinelli, would you like to wish to speak now? Okay, lovely. Okay, you've got 7 minutes and 36 seconds, all right? Okay, so Councillor Moore has given notice of amendment, which is on page 15 of the information pack. Councillor Davey will second the amendment. You have 10 minutes between you. Councillor Moore, wish to speak now?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we have 27 recycling points spread across the city. Historically, these started as the main points for recycling, which is why they've accepted mixed recycling. However, times have changed. The Greater Cambridge Shared Waste Service have improved curbside recycling, curbside collection of this dry mixed recycling drastically in the past few years. Obviously, we've all got a blue bin, or we have access to bags. If you want to, you can have up to 4 free blue bins. So that's 4 bins of of mixed recycling you can have collected from your house every fortnight. Plus, in the last year, we've added the collection of side waste. So if you have a party, for example, and you have excess recycling, or it's someone's birthday, then if you put it in a clear plastic bag, or if it's cardboard, you fold it up and put it next to the bin, then waste crews will come round and collect this from your house. So when Councillor McGurty says the need to travel and we're not giving a good service, what we've done is improved the service of recycling collection from people's homes. Now, there has been an issue of fly tipping, but most importantly, contamination at recycling points. So because of this and the joined up thinking between the waste service and streets and open spaces, a year ago, this was looked at, and the solution was to have a trial of taking the mixed recycling containers out of a number of sites. And this was also requested by Tesco's and Waitrose, where the recycling points were on their land. So we took the mixed recycling away, and since then fly tipping has improved drastically, if not gone completely, and so we have trialled this at another couple of sites. So what we're doing is moving towards having these recycling points offering a wider variety of things. So for example, what you can't have collected at the curbside is light bulbs, shoes, clothing, small electricals. So what the plan is to have more of that available in recycling points across the city so that people don't have to travel far to enable them to recycle a greater variety of materials. But as you said yourself, the first thing we need to do is reduce. So people should be putting their recycling out at home and having better spaces to recycle a wider variety of products.
Councillor Davey, would you like to speak now?
I'll wait, Madam Mayor, thank you.
You've got 7 minutes, okay? Is there any debate? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so Councillor Dryden.
Very much,
Sorry,
Madam Mayor.
brain went
And
then.
I'll be very brief. I just think another way we could reduce a lot of fly tipping around Cambridge if the Lib Dems stopped delivering so many leaflets around Cambridge.
Councillor Somerville.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to point out that time and again the ruling group claim that their lack of ambition on the environment is the fault of somebody else, that it's beyond their control. Here we have a clear call for action for something that's entirely within their power. And yet again, they choose to maintain and defend the status quo. To take just one example, they wipe out the call for action in the amendment and they replace it with a note about the recycling rates. A recycling rate that, as it currently stands, if the council were to collect a ton of hedge clippings and a ton of plastic bottles, compost the hedge clippings and send the plastic bottles to landfill, that would meet the target as it's currently constituted. Is that ambition? Where is the action to meet the talk of crisis and emergency? Thank you.
Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's very nice of Councillor McGurty to speak on behalf of Cherrington residents. I didn't know he was involved in Cherrington and he was finding out what the complaints were. But as a Cherrington ward councillor, we are fed up with the amount of tipped rubbish around those recycling centres. And not according to his problems, we got in contact daily to have the stuff removed, and we received excellent service of having the rubbish removed. But time and time again, the rubbish kept coming back. So we finally said, in conjunction with the executive councillors, we need to take action. We tried everything now, and residents are quite happy when we went round and spoke to them and said, we don't want that rubbish being dumped, and we will remove the recycling points where it was being collected. And since we've done that, it's made a massive difference in Cherrington. So again, it's up to the local ward councillors. So if Councillor McGurty's got a massive problem in Queen Edith, he should be taking that up with the executive councillor and asking what can they do. He doesn't have to come to this council chamber to discuss what happens in his ward to get it sorted out. You can do it by just speaking to the executive councillor.
No? But you've got 3 minutes in your debate, so, okay?
Sorry, do I not get to debate on the amendment as well as...
No, because you've got your 3 minutes, I'm sorry.
So this council has declared a climate emergency, but it seems that councillors opposite are unwilling to act on that said emergency, Madam Mayor. I think I think not giving the opportunity to residents to actually recycle when their blue bins are full or not functional is acting not in the interest of a climate emergency. It's not taking climate change seriously. It's basically forcing those residents to put it into the normal bin that's going to landfill. That increases climate emissions. That increases our dependence on fossil fuel. And I don't understand why, if we have a service that actually works, we're not then continuing that service. We're here restricting something where the citizens can actually show how environmental friendly they're acting, and we're reducing that opportunity. I don't understand the amendment because it actually completely changes the recycling point into a general we're so good we don't need to do any action point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Payne, Councillor Thornborough and Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to pick up briefly on Councillor Goring's note about how the Labour Party's amendment actually makes recycling much more difficult for residents and it's restricting their opportunities to recycle. The curbside collections might have increased in terms of availability, but they do come with a cost. So I don't particularly see that this is a strategy to make recycling more accessible to the most disadvantaged communities. So I don't think it's a good substitute for having recycling provision near to your house. Thank you. And I might be mistaken, Madam Mayor, sorry if I am, but according to City Council's website, curbside collections come with a charge of £30 for 3 items and then £5 for any extra item.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Yeah, okay. So, Councillor Thornborough?
I would very much like to thank the shared service for stopping the fly tipping at the Waitrose recycling point. The residents were actually quite worried about it when it was first said that this was going to happen, but the waste services actually finally opened up 3 underground recycling centres around Trumpington, which have worked quite well. There's one actually got contaminated, and I think there's some education coming. But the residents have actually found now that most of that fly tipping waste was not from residents. It was from people who were coming in and dumping it there, sometimes after the car boot sale. So our services were dealing with other people's waste from outside the city, and it was a real eyesore at that point. And I think it's so much better, and I think people are very grateful. So we're very thankful for that.
Councillor Sargent?
I just need a bit of help, really, with the input from, thanks very much, from Councillor Gearing. So his solution, I don't know, perhaps it's the whole party opposite solution to recycling, is to encourage people to get in their car and drive to a recycling point rather than a curbside one where they can just walk to the end of their drive, garden, whatever, and pick it up. Can we have confirmation perhaps of that? And perhaps it ought to be on one of their leaflets so that this is the policy of the Lib Dems. Please drive to the recycling centre rather than putting things in your blue bin. We've been told you can have 4 blue bins. We brought in side waste as well. So there are a lot more opportunities these days for people to recycle. And the other point, which they seem to be ignoring, is the point that was made that one of the problems with having recycling at the recycling centre for mixed waste is it gets contaminated and it all has to go to landfill. When it's done by people in their own home, there's much better control and we don't have the same level of waste going to landfill. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Cantrell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't know where Councillor Sargent goes, but residents of Newnham normally cycle down to the bottom of Lammasland to recycle their waste.
It's not that good a story. Anyway, so the crux of the problem is, as the Executive Councillor has put forward, is that blue bins in these recycling centres tend to get contaminated. That's the problem. And when they're contaminated, they can't be recycled. You have to go to black bin waste then. Now, the thing is it's very easily done. I must say, after, I don't know, 25 years in Cambridge, I was aghast when I, in a sort of daze, went out to the bins, probably humming to myself, not thinking what I was doing, and put the green waste in the blue bin. Now, I sort of pulled out what I could, and, you know, but I thought that's okay, it's only a little bit of it, a few banana peels, you know, it doesn't matter. But then they didn't collect it, of course, and so I had to sort of go through it with a fine tooth comb, picking it all out. Now, that's just me in one blue bin, but if lots of people use a blue bin in a recycling centre, one of them may accidentally put the wrong waste in, which contaminates the whole lot. So it just doesn't work. It works much better for householders to, once in 25 years, put the wrong waste in the bin. So all I'm saying is, this isn't going anywhere, this conversation. We're doing the right thing. The Executive Councillor has the right strategy.
I haven't got anybody else on my list. Oh, do you want to do your right of reply? Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very pleased to support Councillor McGurty's motion and speak against this wrecking amendment from the ruling group. The fact of the matter is that this council has withdrawn recycling provision by stealth. Correct. This dishonest approach has not been brought to any scrutiny committee. I do not believe the so-called review of these services mentioned in the amendment has been seen by anyone, perhaps not even the Executive Councillor, although if I'm wrong, I would be delighted if she would share it with other members of the council. Instead, residents across the city have turned up at recycling points to find that whilst the Salvation Army may well be able to collect their textiles, the waste service has no space for their stacks of newspapers, scorns their plastic tubs, and has no interest at all in their oversized cardboard boxes. Please note that not everybody has room to store these things in their houses awaiting curbside collection. In parallel, we have seen fly tipping increase by a third since this council was under Liberal Democrat control. Is it possible that these two situations are related? Yes. I don't know for sure, but it certainly seems plausible to me. In our motion, we have asked for a review to look into this very question. Not a tall order. It shouldn't require a great deal of resource. Unfortunately, it seems the Executive Councillor either has no interest in finding out the answer or is so completely certain that withdrawing recycling points has no impact on fly tipping that she deems it unnecessary. That said, I do understand why she may be cautious about recommending reviews in this council chamber. I recall my first council meeting in May 2018. I recall seconding a motion aimed at reducing plastic waste in this council, which is why so many of us have now got glasses in front of us rather than plastic cups we had previously. As part of that motion, the executive councillor, who was the same executive councillor as it is today, pledged that she would bring a report to the Environment and Community Scrutiny Committee within 12 months explaining the council's zero waste strategy. 17 months later, has that report appeared? Absolutely not. So much for reduce, reuse, recycle. To speak a little more regarding the amendment, the Executive Council is quite right to speak of the hard work of our waste crews, which is why it is such a scandal that so little has been done to support them as the group of council workers with the highest level of occupational sickness of any. Boasts of clear plastic bags in the motion, I think I still have a fair bit of time, yet neglects to mention that residents are expected to purchase these, or if they're extremely lucky, wait for months for them to be delivered. In summary, I am disappointed, but not surprised, that the ruling group feels so threatened by this short, simple motion asking for a review of important services which affect the quality of life of residents across the city. And note that I say across the city, we're not focusing just on our own wards. This motion should clearly be supported unamended. We should be aiming higher than a 51% recycling rate, and we should be demanding a decrease in fly tipping rather than attempting to justify its supposedly inexorable rise. Thank you.
Apologise for the bell. We got the wrong timing, sorry. Okay, as nobody else has put their hand up, Councillor Davey, would you like to reply?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You have 7 minutes, if you remember.
Thank you. I'd ask you to support the amendment, and there are 4 reasons why I'd like to put forward for you to support the amendment. The amendment does recognise the work that the City Council already undertake, and it should be understood that this is particular in relation to how we tackle cycling and recycling. Secondly, the work that has been identified is already integrated. As Councillor Moore has already said, there is considerable work that goes on in terms of how we look at recycling on curbsides and also in terms of how we look at recycling centres. And this constant review is therefore the reason in itself that's led to how we would review how these recycling centres will work. This review therefore must go hand in hand with the bit that I think has been missed in this discussion, and that's in relation to the enforcement of action against those who are fly tipping. And I think it's important to recognise that the fines and action is being taken against those who regularly are involved in fly tipping, and I'm aware of this working through my own constituency at Gwyder Street Recycling Centre that's been taking place. The final reason why I believe that this amendment should take place is in fact around the contamination process. If we do not take effective steps to look at how the recycling centres work, then the contamination will continue to happen. And it's only by tackling the contamination that we'll actually be able to be more effective in terms of how we recycle. So finally, I would ask you therefore to accept the amendment and take the amendment forward on the basis of 3 things. First of all, we are able to improve and enhance both curbside collection and recycling. Secondly, we take active steps to take steps against fly tipping. And thirdly, and most importantly, we're able to effectively address contamination at the recycling centres. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Moore, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I think the motion is a bit confused because on one level it says we don't like fly tipping, but then it's also complaining about what we've done about fly tipping, that not only have we done it in response to fly tipping and contamination, but that exactly been successful. We've done it, some of it's been in for months, and it's had a more dramatically successful effect than actually even the waste service and streets and open spaces. So I don't really understand what you're trying to do with this motion other than attack the council. So Councillor McGurty mentioned Wolfston Way, I think, as having lots of issues. I would be happy to take that forward for trial, removing the mixed recycling from there. Currently, I think, apart from mixed recycling, or as in all the stuff that you can put in the blue bin, the only thing is textiles and shoes. So we could look at putting something else in there instead to complement that, such as light bulbs and small electricals. And someone else mentioned someone. No, okay. So to say we're not withdrawing any recycling points, we are removing mixed recycling collection from some recycling points. In fact, we're increasing recycling points. We've got 3 new ones have gone in over the past 2 years. And as I say, we're increasing the numbers of materials that are collected in those. I wasn't really sure about the comment on HR and support for waste crews, but if Councillor Martinelli has any serious concerns, then I would like him to email us about that. Bulky waste, that's what you pay for at the curbs. To have that collected, that would be something like a fridge or a TV. So that we do charge, but obviously your regular recycling is totally free. Well, comes in your council tax, but essentially it's free. Every household is able to have it. And if people don't have the space for bins, then we would like you to contact us at the Waste Service and can offer, what's the word? Yeah, the sort of tailored arrangements. We want to ensure that everyone has the ability to recycle. And as I say, where the mixed recycling has been taken away from those few points, oh, that was it. You said it was done, sorry, that it was underhand. We did a review because the people that own the land were saying you're going to have to take these recycling points away. So we didn't have any choice. We had to change. We've changed. It's been successful.
Councillor McGurty, you have a right to reply of 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council notes that it has done a jolly good job, Madam Mayor, and should take the evening off. Council further notes how clever it's been to delete my entire motion and replace it with the warm words and inaction of a complacent administration. And Council also notes that it is utterly blind and to the misery suffered day in, day out by residents of a city blighted by fly tipping. Well, Madam Mayor, I note that our residents do not agree. 5 years of Labour control in Cambridge have resulted in a record level of complaints, up every single year under this complacent administration. A record level of mismanagement has resulted in a city covered with litter. Well, I will not share in the self-congratulation of a council with its eyes and ears closed to the public, and I'll not support the amendment which utterly fails the residents of our city. And I'm not saying that fewer mixed dry recycling points causes an increase in fly tipping, but is the council saying that it doesn't? Or do we just not know? Can we join the dots for a change? I can tell from the reaction of members opposite during this debate that they don't accept it. But residents do disagree, and they are complaining to the council in record numbers. It is time this council took notice of their residents. It's time to get our heads out of the sand. A council unable to figure out whether its policies have had a positive or negative impact on the lives of its residents is simply not fit for purpose, Madam Mayor. And this would appear to be such a council. Since both department heads report to the same executive councillor, it shouldn't be a very difficult meeting to set up. So let's get our heads together, shall we, Madam Mayor? Let's understand the policy decisions that we make and allow them to inform better decision-making in the future. I urge members to support the motion unamended, and I look forward to accepting an invitation to the Environment and Community Scrutiny Committee in order to see the results. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. We will now go to the vote. Please can I see those in favour of the amendment?
That's 24.
And those against?
That's 15.
Thank you. I will now go to the vote for the motion as amended. Please can I see those in favour of the motion?
That's 24.
And those against? Any abstentions?
15.
Lovely. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm suggesting now that we have a break and we come back at 8:30, please. Thank you very much, everyone.
Of residents to demand better from Greater Anglia, better from the police. We need better enforcement, as currently the situation is an embarrassment to our cycling city. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Geary, you have
I'd like
8
to reserve.
minutes.
I'd like to reserve my right.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Well, you'll have 8 minutes, okay? Councillor Massey has given notice of an amendment which starts on page 17 of the information pack. Councillor Bajent will second the amendment. You have 10 minutes between you to address the council. Councillor Massey, please address the council.
Mini mics, okay. So just quickly, on page 17 of on the 5th chapter, can I just make sure that everyone is aware that it should read on the when it starts, the numbers of police officers and police community support officers, PCSOs who patrol the streets in Cambridge and nationally has seriously reduced, and so as seriously reduced was missed out on the printout there. First of all, I would like to thank you for bringing this motion on which we actually for the most part agree. It does enable me to explain both the work that's gone on in the area and the work that's still going on in regards to cycle point and cycle thefts, and enables me to explain how on earth we got here in the first place. Our motions are very similar, as you've seen. They are literally more or less the same. However, I have put forward the amendment that's deleted part 3 of the original amendment of your original motion that asks to investigate the possibility of planning enforcement against cycle point, as we've already done that. So we've already done it, so there's no point in saying can we do it when we've done it. I've also added in about the quality of the CCTV. The CCTV quality, when you go there, is actually quite good, but there's nobody to look at it. It's literally in a corner of the office on tiny, tiny screens, and there's nobody watching it all the time, so it's almost a bit of a point of why is it there if no one's going to be looking at it. So I want to urge Greater Anglia to correct this in whichever way they can. Cycle thefts, as already been said, it's not a high priority for the police, because they're prioritising other crimes, and quite rightly so, in regards to the higher threat, risk and harm concerns. But it's far from ideal, and it's a situation we find due to drastic cuts the police have suffered in numbers since 2010, and they're having to push forward on some issues by dropping other issues, and that's just not acceptable. Once again, Cambridge is underfunded per head on a vital surface, and we're in the same situation for health, education and police. However, I share concern that cycle thefts are a symptom of a bigger issue and feeding into other crimes such as drug misuse. Given that the National County Lines Coordination Centre has just reported that Cambridge City is the 4th highest city in the country for active county lines, this shows that the gateway crimes such as cycle theft should be taken seriously. Cycle point security has been an issue for some time. Already the Executive of Planning, Katie Thornborough, has asked that the county that the council planning officers write a formal letter to the relevant parties identifying the potential breach of the S106 agreement and setting a short timescale for its satisfactory resolution. I know that many things that at the time of the opening in 2016, there was many recommendations for Cycle Point to carry out, such as marking on the floor with numbers and colour-coded sections, etc., which please keep repeating to them now. And it wasn't carried out, and apparently because of financial issues. Cycle Point tell me that they did used to have marshals that roamed the area every 30 minutes in the past, but I've been told that equally funding was the issue. We are working with Cycle Point to address the issues, such as cleaning the Cycle Point of abandoned bikes, which are bits of bikes that have been left behind, of which there are many, and broken lots and broken bike stands. And to that point, I do understand there was a press release yesterday that they're doing a deep clean the Cycle Point later on this month, and I've asked to be present so I can make sure they've actually cleaned the rest of it up. And there are many issues that I feel have come about from multiple different partners' failings, and so I'm calling a meeting to bring together the police, British Transport Police, Planning Department, Community Safety and CCTV to find a solution to these issues. Just briefly, as we know, at the moment, British Transport Police do not police Cycle Point. It's our police officers that do. It's the only Cycle Point in the country that doesn't have British Transport Police patrolling it. So that's something that I want to rectify, and that's what was reflected in my motion. I would also urge the public to think about their bike safety and bike locks. For example, until I walked around Cycle Point and saw all the broken locks, I didn't realise that the D-locks, the one that all my children have on their bikes, are the ones that are actually being cracked open. So the advice would be don't lock your bike by the wheel, because they seem to be taking the bikes and leaving the wheel, and use 2 different types of lock and lock your bike by the frame. I move my motion. Thank you.
Councillor Bayesian, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right? Okay. You've got 5 minutes and 30 seconds. Is there any debate? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wanted to raise a quick point on the use of CCTV. As has always been brought up, it's not necessarily that the quality of the CCTV in the Cycle Point is bad, it's the fact that it isn't actually used for anything. And I believe in the past, when people have had their cycles stolen from the Cycle Point, they've been told there's far too much footage to look through. We don't have the time. And I think it's worth pointing out that there is a simple procedure known as a binary search, where given a whole, say you had a week of footage and you could identify at one point your bike was visible on that camera. Using this procedure, you could probably pinpoint the exact moment of theft within about 10 to 15 minutes. It's pretty straightforward, it's nice and simple, and I would like to see this kind of thinking employed by Greater Anglia to actually help the police in producing good footage that they can use as evidence for catching these thieves. And I think what is required is just a push to Greater Anglia to actually use their CCTV system, pointing out that there are methods for them to be able to scan through vast amounts of footage really quite quickly.
Is there anybody else? No? I'll just say one thing. Cambridge North Station, we had a lot of problems there. We managed to get some of the work done there to help people so their bikes weren't stolen. Still a bit of work to do there, but it's a lot better at the North Station than what it was when it was first done. So work is being done, but as you know, they find a way of taking it. So we'll carry on doing our best. Okay then, if there's no other debate, Councillor Gehring, would you like to speak now?
I'm happy to speak, Madam Mayor.
It's your... Yes.
I'm glad to see that this is not a wrecking amendment. Indeed, I think apart from the coalition government paragraph, I think it's quite a sensible amendment. But I think the level of complacency that we see in the City Council is unacceptable. The Cycle Point theft, the level of Cycle Point theft was is not a new issue. I admit freely, as someone who's personally experienced that in a very direct fashion, I must admit that I was utterly unaware that the CCTV is not at all monitored. Greater Anglia, I think, is clearly in violation of its planning requirements, and that needs to be investigated. I called Greater Anglia first, and they said, oh, yes, there's CCTV, but no one ever looks at it. Please call the police. I called the British Transport Police, who then said, oh, yes, you know, you're not the first one today, right? There were apparently several thefts on the same weekend. And British Transport Police said, well, you know, we'll take your details and transfer the file to the Cambridge Police. And then the Cambridge Police said, oh, can you pinpoint when your bike was stolen? And I said, I can tell you when I left it and when I didn't find it. And they said, oh, you know, that's 24 hours. That's a long period to watch CCTV. So I think something needs to be done. I think we need a lot more action also by the City Council, because I sense that if we have a cycle point where CCTV should normally be monitored, and it is not ever monitored, then that's a problem. If this had been a car park where lots of cars had been broken in, I think officers would have shut it down, right? Because it's bicycles and a low priority for the police, we're not seeing any action. And so just to complain in the area committee is not enough. I'm very happy to see that the executive councillor has instructed officers now. I'd like to see some action coming out of that. Yeah, and this is not criticizing the police in any way. This is a request to employ better methods and employ better technology in order to prevent this scourge on the cycling population. I also think if we want to encourage sustainable transport, having basically an invitation to steal bicycles next to the station is the wrong message to send to the general population. Thank you very much.
Councillor Moore, you had your hand up. Did you want to speak?
I just wanted to say that I objected to Councillor Opposite's saying the complacency of the council and council staff, and that if it was cars, that later on. I just found that quite offensive with how hard. Being a councillor is quite different to how I imagined, but one of the things is I've always been interested in politics, but what I didn't realise was quite what the council did, and obviously I didn't really know the level of care and hard work and also expertise that there was in the council. And I understand that you're here, as we are, we will bat against each other. I just think you should be a bit more thoughtful in how you discuss council workers. That's...
Okay, thank you.
Today, when it's meant to be the day where we value and appreciate them. And you said you didn't, you weren't holding it against the police, and I agree, I don't, because they've had so many cuts, but it is actually their job to do it, so.
Madam Mayor.
No, hold on, you've spoken.
I think that was
you've spoken. Hold
directly...
on, you've spoken. Yeah.
It is Greater Anglia's job.
Councillor Tatala, you had your hand up.
Madam Mayor, I'm slightly confused. Are we concerned about the theft or the CCTV? In my experience, my day job is to go and check what police does. when I go into a police station, the first thing I ask, is there any CCTV? By the time they do their homework properly and they produce, if there is a CCTV at all, in front of any lawyer representing the accused. Therefore, it is a duty of the police officer to produce the CCTV. Therefore, I suggest what the opposition bench is trying to put is, if you're trying to say CCTV is not working and police is not working, can you confirm what are you actually saying? Are you saying the police is not checking the CCTV? If that is what you're trying to put to the council, I'm sorry, I do not agree with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
So I was a bit confused myself as well. I think the pen has dropped though. So it seems that Councillor Gearing's had his bike nicked and now we're using council time to try and get it back. I mean, you were a bit enigmatic. You said you had personal experience or something. I wasn't quite sure if you were a thief.
Madam
or
Mayor,
what,
Madam Mayor, please intervene, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor,
what I would say is
excuse
that,
me, Madam Mayor.
Point of order, please. Can we be polite and talk to the mayor, please?
I'll repeat that bit. So, on a more serious note, I was just looking in that general direction. Peripheral vision, I can take it all in. So, you know, as my lead councillor for walking and cycling, on several occasions I've talked to the police about this binary thing, about, you know, cutting it in half and chopping down a number of minutes. They're not interested. They're not interested. It doesn't make any difference. I know it's a strong argument, but they won't do it. So we are where we are. They've got their priorities and we're not the police. So you're bringing this motion to us at the council. We are not the police. We are not the British Transport Police. We don't run the facility. What are you trying to do? It's just wasting our time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bayesian, you have your right now. You have 3 minutes. No, sorry, 5 minutes and 30 seconds.
5 minutes and 30 seconds. If you could warn me when I've got 5 minutes left. I commiserate with the comrade that's lost his bike. I really do. And I think if it took that to get it here in this council, then maybe that's not such a bad point, you know. We're in tandem on this. Where I feel about this so strongly is that it's a personal crusade of mine at East Area Committee, as people will know. And I'm always challenging the police service. And no, please. I kept quiet. I only mumbled when you were talking. It's the police service's responsibility to sort this crime. It's a gateway crime for drug addicts. People order bikes and drug addicts go and steal them to order and then they get paid and then they buy the drugs with them. The drug addiction in this city is getting out of control because our police service has failed to concentrate on drug dealing on the streets. We have a similar situation here. Our police service is failing to deal with this crime. It is one of those things that on Police 5 you would have said, well, isn't it easy because here's a picture of the bike thief. But our police service don't even look for the bike thief. Now, in earlier days, I challenged the Police and Crime Commissioner over that. And I think the responsibility falls back in his lap here because we are being fouled by our police service. And we are being fouled in the same way as we are fouled by our county council, where a Tory-run organisation has little regard for what happens in this city because they don't have any councillors in it. And we are suffering the same way in the police service. When a copper turns up and you're in a spot, that's great. We love that. And that's great, doing a fantastic job. But the question is when? You could dial the police now and you wouldn't know when and where they were going to come from. We wouldn't know how long they were going to take. It's a failing police service, largely, as far as this city is concerned. And I think we need to add pressure onto the Police and Crime Commissioner. This should be taken up with the most important, because it's only a push bike, isn't it? But a lot of people rely on that push bike to be able to get to work. It's a tool of the trade. And for some of us, if somebody steals my bike, that's a nuisance. I can't afford to buy another one. A lot of people can't. So it's an important theft. It's a really important theft when you steal somebody's bike. So I think that we should get back on the same side, people, and we should all vote for this, and we should all support the motive behind it, which is to stop bike theft and to ask the police to do what we actually pay them to do. Thank you.
That was good, 3 minutes and 5. So you did well. Councillor Massey, you have the right to reply, 3 minutes.
Keep it short because Dave said quite a lot there. So yes, Dave and I, we both have sat at different times on the police and crime panel. We both have mentioned this over and over and over again, along with everything else, to the Police and Crime Commissioner. As I've said before, and as it's been minuted in the previous Police and Crime panel meeting, the response I got from the Crime Commissioner was, Cambridge is not an island, you're not special. So, you know, we are pushing, but we're pushing against the Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner right now. As I said, CCTV is an issue because Greater Anglia are not bloody watching it. And that's why I've put in the motion that, and in my preamble that that's why we're bringing them onto the table to actually see if we can do something and bring our CCTV into it and see if that will sort it out, will help. So we are doing a big meeting with putting all the different components into it to see if we can put the right pressure. And it isn't British Transport Police right now, and it should be. And that's why I'm asking British Transport Police to step back in and to start to be able to patrol it, because they are on the station. They do the patrols of the station and the car park, but they don't patrol the cycle point. And that's where the issue is. Cycle Point did tell me in my last meeting with them that they were looking at hiring a security firm to do the patrols again of 30 minutes. And I said, well, that's only useful if you're clearing the bikes that are broken and stolen, so that when you do the next patrol, you can highlight the fact that a bike has been stolen in that 30 minutes and then go back and have a look at it. So we are working really, really hard. We've never been complacent on this issue. I'm more than happy to speak to anybody about community safety and all the stuff I'm doing, because maybe I won't be so exhausted, because there's an awful lot that we are doing community safety wise, and there's an awful lot we have been doing on Cycle Point. And as Dave has eloquently put it, the problem is our police force aren't doing their job, mainly because they're so understaffed and underfunded by the Conservative government that their hands are behind their back. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martinelli, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So yes, I think there's been some good debates, and I think this is not meant as a criticism for any of the activity that's been done so far. I clearly wouldn't want to do that. I just think that, as Councillor Bajan said, that we can perhaps apply more pressure by speaking as a council as a whole. I was sorry to hear that Councillor Smart thinks that this is wasting his time, but I would be pleased to see him vote for it in a couple of minutes' time in any case.
Point of order, our time.
That's fine. The reason why the planning point was particularly vague in the motion is because there is, in addition to the work that Councillor Thornborough has done, a neighbouring planning application on Devonshire Road, 18/1678/4, which I think is relevant and is not referenced in the answer to my supplementary question, which I think could be considered, but I'm happy to correspond with that after the meeting. I think, the amendment, we have no real problem with it, and we'll be happy to support the motion.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now go to the vote. Please, can I see those in favour of the amendment?
That's 24.
Those against? Those abstaining?
That's 14.
Okay. I will now go to the vote on the motion as amended. Please, can I see those in favour of the motion as amended?
That's unanimous, thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now turn to agenda item 12. In the absence of Councillor Collis, I understand that Councillor Thornborough will move the motion on food poverty. This can be found on page 4 and 5 of your agenda. And I understand that Councillor McQueen will second. You have 10 minutes between you. In the absence of Councillor Smith, Councillor Herbert will respond at the end of the debate. Oh, I've got Councillor McQueen, so Councillor Shield. Okay, thank you. Okay, so Councillor Thornborough, please address the council. You've got 10 minutes.
This is about another crime, and it's the crime that for right of food for all people and how many people don't have it. But this is brought by Alex Collis, and what I'm going to read are her words, and it's pertinent that it's been brought in this week highlighting the campaign to end hunger in UK. So these are Alex's words. Okay. There is a scene in I, Daniel Blake, that colleagues around the chamber will no doubt remember vividly. The young mother has taken her children to a food bank, and because she is so hungry, in desperation, she opens a can and starts eating straight away from it, crying when she's discovered by one of the volunteers. That this isn't fiction. It's the real life of hundreds and thousands of people in Britain today. It's the real life of people here in Cambridge. I've seen it firsthand, more than once, many times more than I want to remember. Food poverty is on the increase in the UK, with over 1 million people receiving emergency food provisions from the Trussell Trust, and that's only the people actually accessing support. For each one of them, there are likely to be many, many more in need. They are perhaps not aware of the support available, or they may simply find it too difficult to ask for help. When your reserves of energy are low, when you've not eaten, when you've been struggling with the Department of Work and Pensions, it takes a great deal of courage to walk into a food bank or ask for a free meal for the first time. I've regularly seen people waiting outside a distribution centre for some time, trying to work up the courage to step over the threshold. We know that food poverty is increasing here in Cambridge. The excellent comprehensive report published in 2018 by Cambridge Sustainable Food highlights just how much it is touching individuals and families across the area we all represent. There won't be one member here tonight in the chamber who hasn't spoken to a local resident who has experienced food poverty. Over 50% of the respondents in Cambridge Sustainable Foods research who identified as being in a family group, the majority of whom were women, reported going the whole day without eating. One woman told researchers how she would regularly come up with excuses for her family why she was not eating with them. I'll eat later. I ate earlier. I'm not hungry. She wasn't eating because there was nothing left for her. 54% worried about not having enough food. 60% were unable to access healthy and nutritious meals. There's clear evidence of multiple linked issues such as fuel poverty, housing insecurity, low wages, 0-hour contracts. So we ask ourselves, what should we be doing? What can we do in the face of such growing and apparently insurmountable issues? Cambridge is lucky in many ways. There are many excellent projects across the city, and all of us here this evening owe them a huge debt of recognition and thanks for supporting our communities. I want to highlight just a couple of examples of the work that is happening here. Firstly, the holiday lunch programme developed and overseen by this council's community development team. Last year, they served 2,737 free meals to families in Trumpington, Abbey, Arbury, Chesterton, across the city. Recent sessions run by Cambridge Sustainable Food in partnership with Cambridge United were regularly attended by upward of 50 people. The community development team have done a fantastic job of developing and publicising holiday provision. Food Cycle has been operating in Cambridge for 7 years now, and their service has developed from one weekly meal in the city centre attended by around 20 people, the majority of whom were living on the streets, to meals in 3 different areas of the city that can be attended by upwards of 60 people. We should also acknowledge the brilliant work done by Cambridge City Food Bank, whose volunteers show care and kindness towards their clients that we could all learn from. Last year, they distributed 8,766 emergency food parcels, as well as toiletries and Christmas hampers. They do an amazing job. I urge Council tonight to support our call to recognise the work being done across the city to tackle food poverty. Some of these organisations have joined together with Cambridge Sustainable Foods to form the Food Poverty Alliance to produce the action plan that I am asking Council to endorse tonight. People across the city and here in Cambridge need it. We should be able to work together to find a solution, a long-term solution that actually addresses some of the underlying structural causes of food poverty rather than just the symptoms. We know from data collected by organisations such as food banks that the main reason for people falling into food poverty are benefit delays, benefit sanctions, and low wages. Cambridge Labour is committed to tackling inequality. It's at the heart of who we are as a group. It's why I wanted to stand as a councillor. It's also why I'm so pleased to see the success of initiatives like the Living Wage campaign, and I want to thank officers for their hard work on this. Until people can earn a fair wage, we won't be able to really tackle food poverty. Sue Hayman, Labour's Shadow Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Secretary, in calling for an introduction of a Fair Food Act, said, "We will ensure that everyone has access to nutritious and sustainable food. That means that everyone is able to feed themselves, sufficient income, reduced living costs, social welfare, a real living wage. No more bedroom tax, an uprated carers allowance, and an end to punitive benefit sanctions. What kind of a barbaric society punishes someone for missing an appointment by making their children go hungry?" We should be adding our voices to this powerful call for action, and that is why I am seeking Council to support this motion tonight. Thank you.
Shall?
Reserve my right, thanks.
Okay, so that's it. Is there any debate? Okay. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and apologies for the technical glitch earlier. I would also like to thank Councillor Collis for bringing forward this motion and for the leadership she has shown in combating these issues in Cambridge, both here and outside of this chamber. As a volunteer for Food Cycle, I have seen the talent and passion that Chef Collis has brought to projects across our city. The issue raised is a critical one. And I have seen the importance of providing good meals at schools through my own childhood in a very deprived comprehensive school and during my work as a school governor in one of the largest schools here in the county. I'm therefore very glad to endorse the detailed action plan that has been presented, and I would recommend to all councillors here tonight that they review the actions in here and look to take back what they can to their own wards to help support some of the key actions being taken. As a party, we've also adopted a policy that would make access to food a legal right, and I would note that our now Lib Dem MP, who does serve part of this city, Heidi Allen, has been working with the former Labour MP Frank Field looking at this very issue. So we are happy to support all aspects of the motion, and I thank you for it. Thank you.
Councillor McQueen.
I just want to give thanks to Katie for reading that out for Alex, and what a moving speech Alex provided there for us, and the reality and the sobering thought that we have here now. It made me so emotional to think that we're sat here now, probably food in our bellies, content, warm, all of those things, and there's so many children out there who don't have those things. And the I, Daniel Blake, I don't know whether you guys have seen it. I just recommend that you do watch it. It's very moving, and I think this is something that we all need to be united on. And I just wanted to give my thanks and make sure that Alex knows that she's done a sterling job on this, and I urge everyone to support it.
Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a disgrace, really, that we have to be discussing this tonight. We're the 6th richest country in the world, over 500,000 people on food parcels last year, growing all the time. And I think this is an item as a council we can all get behind, and rather than just have a vision and a strategy, we can put stuff into action. So tonight, I believe this will be the start of an action to get these people being fed and where they rightly belong, not be invisible.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? No? Okay then, can I go to... Yeah. I was just about to say. That's all right.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Don't forget 3 minutes and 20 seconds.
Right, you are. So I'd like to echo all the remarks that we've heard around the Chamber on this item. I want to commend the motion from Councillor Alex Collis. I would like to praise the work of the Cambridge Food Poverty Alliance, especially the holiday lunch scheme, and pay special tribute to Cambridge United and Cambridge Food Bank. I'd also like to mention that the churches have been great around the town, including and especially St Giles Church, who open up a couple of times a month, welcoming in homeless or low-income people for free food. I think that's fantastic. Mention is made in the motion that Councillor Thornborough has presented on behalf of Councillor Collis of the Department of Work and Pensions. And certainly I have repeated experience of calling the DWP on behalf of residents, and without exception you will be on hold for 45, 50, 55 minutes only to be told that the number that you've used is not the right number, even though it's come from the letter, which threatens cancellation of benefits for non-attendance at an appointment, which I think is the example used by the Shadow Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Secretary. So my experience has been that when benefits are delayed or if there are sanctions, one of the things that suffers is food. And I think it's because of that. So some of the people I know who've had difficulty even getting through to the DWP have been left in a situation where they will only eat if, when they go to the co-op, when they go to Sainsbury's or Tesco's, there's some food items in the reduced area. Now, I think it's fantastic that those reduced areas are there, but I think that's very telling, and I'm glad that the example of the DWP was mentioned, because behind the immediate poverty and hunger is the horrible nightmare of trying to make contact in order to chase your benefits with the department that should be helping. So I think for these reasons, and the film is mentioned, Cambridge Labour staged a showing of that film. All these issues are dramatised but not exaggerated. That's for certain. So I do recommend, as others have done, the Ken Loach film. And last but not least, I would say that I hope we can all together support this, and especially, as well as commending the work that's been done locally, delighted to see that there is in this act, or sorry, in this the bill that the Shadow Secretary is proposing, the legal right to food as part of the Fair Food Act. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Collis.
Is there any more? No? Okay, so Councillor Herbert, you've got 3 minutes for right of reply.
I'll be brief. I do think that the quality of this analysis really is superb. Clearly there's a lot of work to be done. It is the case that people, families that with children where they are unable to provide them with adequate food, it just completely destroys their life opportunities. So the efforts that are put in to provide breakfast clubs, to provide better lunches, particularly the holiday lunches when often children don't see anything between morning and night. Just the number of interventions that are brought forward and the commitment over a 3 to 4 year period to actually achieve all this. It is a practical partnership. It involves a huge range of people, including people volunteering who are also councillors as well as hundreds of others. And it's an achievable goal, and we can make a real difference for children in this city.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thornborough, you have 3 minutes.
I don't think I need to add to this, really. Thank you.
Lovely. Okay, I'll now go to the vote then. Please can I see those in favour of the motion? Lovely. Okay, thank you. Agenda item 8, members are asked to note the written questions and answers received for this meeting on page 37 of your information pack. And also there's we've received this tape, so I'd like to table it. Agenda item 13 from Councillor Martinelli. All right? Okay. The date of the next council meeting is the 13th of February 2020. Please could I ask you to take your rubbish away with you and dispose of it in a rubbish bin? And good night and a safe journey home. Thank you.
Please wait for the Mayor to leave the chamber before departing. Thank you.